Hello, everyone. I'm Meredith Goldstein of the Love Letters Advice column in the Boston Globe, and welcome to another installment of Taking Care, a series where we talk to mental health professionals about how to be good to ourselves and to other people in this pandemic. Experts on this series have ranged from someone who studies healthy escapism and superheroes through pop culture to someone who focused on the experience of older LGBT community members. Last week, we had a music therapist on who explained why it can be more therapeutic and beneficial to scream to Linkin Park than to listen to soothing lullabies. And today I'm very excited because we have my friend Joani Geltman on. And Joani is a parenting coach, a clinician, a college instructor. She is the author of A Survival Guide to Parenting Teens. And a full disclosure moment, she is also someone I usually meet for dinner in person at the Cheesecake Factory. And it's kind of hard for me to see her in my computer and not be able to order my salad and my Diet Coke in the way that we normally see each other. But she is a great friend, and I thought it would be wonderful to have her on because her specific expertise is parenting and kids, and she's very good about teens. And so many of our experts every week in this Taking Care series have said specifically that teenagers have it harder than so many other kids, that they know exactly what they're missing, that they're missing these big developmental celebrations. So I wanted to get really narrowly focused on teens. Also, when I put out a notice about today, I invited teens to come as well. I'm not going to delude myself and think that we have an audience of teens because they probably are not very interested in what I have to say. But if you are here, I appreciate it. And I'm hoping that there's a lot of guidance for teens about how to deal with your parents, if that makes sense. So Joani, thank you for being here.
Meredith, I'm imagining you with your Chinese chicken salad and I'm having my my barbecue chicken salad.
I know, it's like sort of the same thing, except not at all.
We're still across from me though, so that's good.
Yes. So can you just start by telling everybody a little bit about what you do? And I know you visit schools also, so I wanted you to talk about that element of it, because some people watching or if they're reading a transcript of this might recognize your name and think, oh, I think she was at my school.
Yeah, I've been everywhere in New England. I do so many different kinds of things. So I do, I'll go small to big. I do parent coaching. I don't like working in an office, so I either meet people for coffee or I go to their houses, or we do it over the phone or FaceTime now. And it's like a real targeted, my kid won't do XYZ, or I'm not getting along with my kid, what should I do? So it's a very targeted problem solving kind of approach. So it's not like therapy. I don't spend a lot of time talking about like feelings. We kind of just go, the feeling is I'm frustrated, and then we try to alleviate that somehow. I try to alleviate that. And then I do what I call Ask the Expert parties, which are, I'm sort of like the Tupperware lady. I go to people's houses and they'll get groups of people together that are, maybe their kids are all friends, or maybe they're all friends and they have kids the same age. And, I just come in and again, just a lot of question and answer, kind of like today. And then I go to companies and schools and organizations and give, sort of a 2-hour talk on, again, it's a little bit of the theoretical, but mostly it's about, I have one called Adolescent Psychology, the parent version. It's a way for parents to understand developmentally what their kids are going through. But then we get right down to, what should I do when I'm in the middle of a fight with my kid and he walks out the door? So my philosophy is that people are looking for answers, especially when they're got more than one kid, they're working, they've got things going on in their work life, their relationship life, their parents' life, and they just kind of need someone to tell them what to do. And luckily I like to do that. So, so that's what I do.
So there's been this, running theme in all of these Taking Care videos about teens in general. First, we heard from Dr. Ellen Broughton from MGH, who talked about how teens develop and sort of how they assess risk, and how this might even be difficult to fully understand, like why we have to stay home. Then last week, I was really interested in this music therapy, chair from Berkeley, because she talked about the reason that we all tend to gravitate to the music we loved when we were adolescents. Like I told her I was listening to like all Richard Marx from the 80s. And she said, well, that's because it reminds you.
How bad.
I'm going to sing Right Here Waiting for you.
Okay.
But she said, I'm going back to the music I liked as a teen because it was such an important time. It's also reassuring, and it's a simpler time in my mind, but these are the moments where we make these very big memories. And then I got very sad because I thought for so many kids right now, they've missed out on some of those memories, and we don't know when they're going to get them back. So can you sort of, talk about the fact that these losses are real, and what are you telling parents, about how to frame these big losses for teens right now?
Yeah, there's two answers to that question, because one thing is that parents have to parents are absorbing every feeling that their kids are having. And the problem right now is that they have their own feelings, right? They're dealing with, it's not just their kids are going through something that they're not going through as well. So that adds another layer, because now everybody's kind of feeling the same things at the same time. And when that happens, you tend to lose objectivity, because your parents may be projecting because parents are remembering, when I was a senior in high school, or when I was a junior, I went to my prom and I wore this dress. And so we're going to get to the kid part, but there may be some transference of feelings that they're having that maybe their kids are having, but maybe not to the extent that their parents think they're having it.
Well, I want to pause there, because you bring up such a good point. I don't know if you saw it, but like right around the start of this, some person, an adult, started this thing on Facebook of like, to show solidarity with the seniors and juniors who are missing their proms, share your prom picture. And I'm seeing everybody's fun prom picture, and I'm thinking, do the kids care what we look like at prom? This isn't for them. This is for us.
Yeah, they don't care.
Right. They don't care at all. This is our own exercise.
When they'll care, they'll care when they're 30. And they'll go back and say, oh, let's see what, now could care less about their parents either at this point either.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, their experience feels very singular to them. And the thing is, that doesn't usually, it really is singular to them, because no kids have ever experienced this before, which is, they're making history. And that's kind of the, my Pollyanna side of this. And I'll talk about a little of the real feeling of it. But when you talked about the music that you listen to, and how, it's like so fresh in your mind about, well, when I was, I broke up with this boy, I listened to this music, and or I was driving around the car with my friends, I was listening to, doing my exercise today, and some Beach Boy song came on, and I had such a visual of like sitting in my friend's car, smoking cigarettes, and, because the teen brain, the emotional part of the teen brain, the amygdala, is in the highest activation it will ever be in its lifetime, in its brain lifetime. And so what happens is, anything emotional that happens, breakups, awesome times with your friends, an experience, whatever, the emotional piece of it is so much stronger than it would be for any other. When we're an adult and we have a great moment, it's not going to create brain connections really in the same way. And that's why things are parked away. The amygdala and the hippocampus, or the memory part of the brain, live next door to each other. And so when you have this a strong emotion, it's going to park it away in your memory in a very different way. We'll talk about the bad news. I'd like to go to the good news. The good news is they're making new memories, which they don't know. This is sort of like secret sauce for parents. 10 years from now, they're going to go, God, remember, when it was, graduation, and everybody drove by your house, and, something happened, or we did some group. I mean, the creativity that's coming out of some of these classes, where they're making these compilations and putting them on Facebook, and the choirs, and just all these unbelievable things that is creating the memories. So they're different memories. They're not the prom. They're not the actual walking and getting the diploma, because that's all they know right now. Those are the markers of what it means to be a senior. What does it mean to be a freshman? Everybody has these in their head. Oh, when I'm a freshman, I'm going to do this, and when I'm a sophomore, I'm going to do this. And there's that imagery that you take with you from childhood of what it's going to mean when you're a teenager, and so you have these expectations, and now what you imagine and you've been thinking about your whole life, that isn't going to happen. What they don't know is they're just creating different ones. And these will take on a lot of meaning for them later on in life. It's not going to help them right now. So that's sort of like, for a parent, take a breath, take a breath to know that they won't be traumatized by this. I mean, they have so many things ahead of them. This is the singular moment in time, and they are creating some amazing memories that they don't even know they're creating, and how important that will become to them later. But and the other thing is that parents get into over problem solving mode right now. So their kids are disappointed. They are crying. They are feeling like life is unfair. There's what we call this part of thinking called the personal fable, where teens have this sense of uniqueness, of nobody in the whole world understands what I'm feeling. I'm the only person in the whole planet. That that sort of self-centeredness of being a teenager. Like, you're the only, even though, the world is going through this. And truthfully, there is nothing a parent can say to make this better. It's not, because the situation is not going to change. So sometimes so what happens a lot, because parents are feeling helpless. And I mean, I'm on a bunch of different parent, Facebook groups, and I'm watching the conversations of, how sad they're feeling for their kids, and what can we do, and and they're in problem solving mode, and there should be new. Someone will create something new, but sometimes it is just about saying, oh, I'm so sorry, honey. This is unfair. It sounds so simplistic, validation, but sometimes that's really all you can do. And then ask, is there, do you want to talk about some other alternatives, about making some new memories, or, you're the first generation ever to go here, is there something? And I think a lot of kids are doing that on their own. They are figuring it out, and they're going to go through periods where they're just sad and hopeless, and why should I even do school? What's the point? To generating, they're on TikTok with their friends, and they're creating, so it's going with the flow. It's not going to, I think parents are worried that they feel this one way and that's it.
I want to get to some reader questions. And by the way, that makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking that I sometimes feel like I am having the most unique experience too.
Well, you are, because
we've had some readers submit questions ahead of time, but everybody else, you'll see that Q&A button at the bottom. So feel free to submit your questions, and we'll do questions in real time too. So feel free to add in. Roberta asks, my daughter was supposed to head off to New York City to a trade school, and we are both having fears that it won't happen. How do I help both of us cope with her unsure future? I mean, this seems to be a problem across the board for anyone who was supposed to go to college.
Anybody.
We don't know, right? So like, that's a huge, and I have a friend whose kid is waiting to find out if she's going to go abroad. It's like the question marks must be really daunting.
Yeah, and I think, again, we're in uncharted territory here, because as an expert in parenting, I've never gone through this before either. It's not like I have any magic sauce, because I don't, I've been doing this for 40 years, but I've never been through a pandemic before with parents. So I think that's part of the problem, is that living with this kind of uncertainty at different developmental stages, are like, adults have more capacity for not knowing the future. But some of that is also personality. If you're a person who has anxiety anyway, and if you're a kid who has anxiety anyway, there's going to be levels to this. There's going to be, some kids who will, they're just go with the flow kids. They've been those kids their whole life, and they'll just say, oh, it'll be fine in the fall. They don't even want to deal with it. They just don't even want to go there. And I think the parents who are have been the planners, the ones who, they've had this thing set up for an entire year. I mean, they've been on it, and now they have no answer for their kid. And this is a space they are not comfortable with. So you've got an adult who, all of us are in the same boat of like, I teach college, am I going to go back in the fall? Don't know. I mean, how do I deal with that in terms of work? So some of it is just an acknowledgement. There is one thing that I think parents and kids could do is to come up with an alternative plan. So, say, okay, so it's possible it won't happen. So rather than waiting and then feeling like you've lost everything, is to try to come up with something that might feel not as good, but so that it feels, it's very unsafe. It feels very unsafe when you don't know what's coming. And so, so I think it's sort of brainstorming. I mean, let's just assume you don't go. What would be some way you would want to spend this year?
It makes me wonder whether, I was so type A coming out of high school and college, and what was next. And, I'd like to think that if there's a positive that can come from this, it's that idea of I must do this by this. I must do this by this. And now that I'm in my 40s, whenever I meet, younger relatives, friends or whatever, and they talk about a gap year where they talk about, I wish I had been, some of it is what you're financially able to afford, but I wish that I had been open to some of these different kinds of schedules, that not everything had to happen one after the next. And I wonder if
you just brought up a really good point, which is, I think psychologically and developmentally, this is going to, this is a generation of kids who have lived in instant gratification for their whole life. That's part of the reason why this is it's uncomfortable for all of us, but for this particular generation where, they had a lot of control. They control when, that they can be attached to people pretty much, all the things that have gone along with technology and having parents who are so engaged and involved in their kids' lives. And, my mother wasn't involved with my life at all. And now we've got parents who are incredibly involved. And I think that we're building resilience in this generation of kids who are going through this. And I think that's a really good thing, because there's a lot of, I think oftentimes when adolescents are disappointed by something, they have a bad teacher, or they didn't get the school play, or they, their friends didn't invite them to the sleepover, and, they have a lot of disappointments, but then, parents are there to kind of fix it, or go talk to the teacher, or give the kid a plan about what they should do. And I think that, when kids are uncomfortable now, they have so many ways that they can not feel their discomfort. They can, they watch TV, they watch Netflix, they go on, on Snapchat or TikTok. I think this is going to help kids learn to deal with uncomfortable feelings that they can't fix. And I think it will only help them as they move into adulthood, because it's going to make, you've already seen people doing so much creative thinking and so much creative problem solving. And I think that's a good thing. I'm not saying, oh, I wish we, just stay in the pandemic and then we can see all this creative thinking, but I think these kids they'll take this with them. And they will use it at other points in their life when they're stressed, or when they, I've been reading all these things. Our kids are cooking. They're doing all these things that they, I read today some girl has taken up knitting. Another, so they're experiencing things. Maybe that was the Globe article, but there was some article I just read, all of these things about what kids were saying, what was the good thing that happened. And one of the good things is they said they rediscovered things that they used to love to do as children and haven't done in 4 years.
I can say that of adults too, right? We're all sort of finding.
Again, I think, I like that, because I think they're learning to sit with themselves and, learning to cope with uncomfortable feelings rather than, being able to run away from them. And, so I feel I'm not worried. I have to say, I'm not worried about, I understand their disappointment, and it is really, really sad. And they will be feeling really sad, but I also know that this is not going forever. It's, so this is just my secret sauce. This is how, so parents can say, all right, we just have to be in the moment with them. But I know inside, and I wouldn't say this to a kid, because then they'll feel, completely ununderstood, not understood. It's like, well, it's going to be better. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear it's going to be better. They just want to hear about how really, really bad it is all the time. But, whenever the tide turns, they will flip out of it in a second. I mean, they will just be in the moment of whatever the next thing is, because that's what teens do. You know, they whatever the moment they're in becomes the most important moment. And so right now, this is the most important moment, but there'll be a different moment in 6 months. The first time they can get together, when they play their first game, when they have their first recital, when they, just go to campus for the first time, those will be so momentous in some ways, as meaningful, if not more, because of they had to wait.
We have two questions that are similar but flipped, I think, a little bit. So Rachel had submitted this question ahead of time. She said, I'm getting pressure from my teen to see her friends. Mm-hmm. And while we have agreed that if she practices social distancing, stays outdoors and wears a mask, we feel like we need these guidelines in the new world, how many friends she can see at a time or at all. And, Rachel is saying this is a slippery slope, but she gets that her 16-year-old needs some sort of outlet. Meanwhile, we just got a different question, very similar, that says, my teenage son is very concerned about catching COVID-19. I've tried to explain to him that it's safe to take a walk or take a quick bike ride while wearing a mask, but he won't venture outside. What are some of the ways I can encourage him to get outside without adding to his anxiety? So on the one hand, we have kids who are like, just let me see my friends. And how do we know when to trust that young people are going to follow these rules? And even when we don't fully know to trust the rules ourselves, I have no children, but I think if I had a child right now, I would be the kind of parent who'd be like, we're all staying indoors, right? It's very scary to me. But this idea that it can go the other way, that being outside can be very scary for young people.
Yeah, I've actually talked with a parent who had that same feeling and had that kid who didn't want to leave the house. And I think that in some ways that kid is probably being true to who he is, generally speaking. Like it may be that he's not, maybe he's more introverted, or she, that part of their life was never the best, or their go-to place in the first place. And I had one parent say, they're very comfortable being at home. I mean, they're, so you don't want that either. And so I guess what I would do is, start real baby steps, literally, like sitting in the backyard, just like you would do with someone who has social anxiety. And this is based on reality. So it's, it's validating. I get that it's scary. Let's think, that all the things that will make you safe. Let's first just sit in the yard and do, just take a baby step, and also find out what it is that this kid is really freaking out about. Is he, is it worried what will he do if he sees a person? How will he handle that? So it's, I think, one of the things that, when you spend so much time in your home and you haven't ventured outside, the world now is a scary place. I mean, it seems like a scary place. It is a scary place. And you kind of don't know what's lurking. And so one thing I would do with the kid who doesn't want to leave is to say, let's play it out. Let's play that out. So you walk out of the house to go take a walk around the block, and you've got your mask on and you see another person. Tell me what makes you feel uncomfortable about that situation. And really, and then say, what could you do? Let's rehearse it. You'd walk over to the other side of the street, because sometimes kids can't, the fear overtakes the practical. And sometimes they need a rehearsal. They need a time to play out the scenario, give them options about what they would do in the scenario, and making sure that they're coming up with options. Not, well, if you see another person, again, parents like to get into the problem solving part. And then they say, well, this is what you're going to do. And then it's, if you're doing that, then it's not them creating the space for them to make some different choices. They're just hearing it this way.
I mean, as a grown-up, and I acknowledge that I keep comparing myself to the teenagers we're talking about, but, as someone with, asthma, and that, I've talked about that sort of lingering anxiety in the beginning, and even now, there's so many mixed signals, right? It's like, stand 6 feet away, you must have a mask on, go outside if it's essential, don't go outside if you don't need to, get some healthy exercise. And one of my responses was, well, what if I get up super early and I go outside and I'm the only person? And then it was sort of like, I just have to wonder if there's.
I was just going to say that as a that a parent could say, hey, let's get in the car and go on a potential route. Let's see how many people are there. Let's look for a place that feels safe to you.
Yeah.
So it's like you acknowledge the fear, and then you problem solve about what would be a way to make you feel both safe, And I think what you just said is absolutely perfect. Thank you, Meredith. You just answered.
Well, I mean, but I also wonder, like, in terms of the question about the teen who wants to see friends,
Yeah.
sometimes I also wonder, that's also an adult problem. Friends might say, well, my parents are letting me do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to take a bike ride with friends. I'm going to go outside and take a walk. And it's like, well, that might not be the rules of your household. Maybe you have someone who's, higher risk in your household where you can't make the same choices. That's got to be a complicated question.
Yeah, I'm on, as I said, I'm on all these Facebook groups, and one of the biggest things is I was driving by the high school the other day, and there were a bunch of kids in the parking lot, and they were not keeping, 10 feet apart, and they didn't have masks on, and where are those parents, and why aren't they?
Right.
Oh, there is just, there's so much quarantine judgment going on, and which it, because it comes out of fear and reality.
Right.
That would scare me too. One of the things that I think there's two ways parents can go with the kids who want to do something. So one is that you can, vetting another family. I think this is going to be a time of people vetting each other, and this may take the parents talking to each other. I mean, it's going to be hard if it's a senior in high school. That will be a different negotiation. But if you're talking about, sort of middle school, because I've seen kids out, a lot of middle school out on their bikes, they're not wearing their masks. They may wear them when they leave the house. But, kids, they don't want to live like that. I mean, there are kids who I've seen who are masked and seem very conscientious. And then there were those kids who were just like, I want to be a teenager. I just want to be with my friends and, and ride my bike. And so it may be that that you vet another family and say, here's what's been going on. Here's who we've seen. And, Joey wants to get together with Sam. Who have you seen, where are you? What are your family rules about quarantining, so we can find a way that maybe our kids can, be outside together on the basketball court, because you have not been to work, you haven't seen any people. And so that might be one way, at least, like doing one friend at a time. I think that, again, many kids are not going to they're going to get mad. They are just going to get mad. It's not fair, especially if there are other families, just like there are other families that let kids drink in their houses, just like other families who, there's always, parents who have different sets of rules for their kids. And now we have the quarantine version of that. And what you said is that oftentimes it's like, well, this is what the rules are of our family. And also acknowledging, I get it feels unfair to you. It feels unfair. I get that. And safety is the number one thing in our, right now is in our household. So let's come up with other options that feel safe. And, you're going to have some kids who are just going to walk out the door, are going to say F you to their parents, and you can't make me. And my friends are going and I'm going. And, that's a conundrum, because, now they are going out I wish you can hear me stumbling on it.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the thing. They are so sick of being in the house, and finding a way for them to feel like they can be outside and safe and so that's the problem solving piece, is to say, to your kids, well, what are you going to do, 17-year-old kid? What do you think I'm feeling as a parent right now about, I have this whole system I use with, I've used it with other stuff, never quarantining, but, rather than the parent going into their diatribe, and I don't want you going, oh, because you could bring stuff into the house, parents will tend to go on and on and on. But if they say to their kids, tell me what you think makes me uncomfortable about you going out with your friends. And they're going to say, you're afraid I'm going to do this. You're going to be afraid I'm not going to do this. Yes, all those things are going to make me afraid. So next step, what are you going to do, Joani, to make me feel okay about those things? And unless you can come up with a convincing, put them in charge and taking ownership of how safely, if they can come up with a way that makes you feel safe about it, drive over and check up on, I don't know. I mean, they have to be creative. If they're motivated to want to do this on some level, then they have to take responsibility for figuring out a way that is going to, and if they don't, then they don't get to do anything. In other words, it doesn't have to be the parents' job to fix it. it can be the kid's job to make their parents feel safe and okay about it. And
yeah, no, I mean, we have a lot of questions about kids who are doing this right. And by right, I mean, they're adhering to the rules, they're staying home and they aren't pushing back. But then the parents are worried about how they're spending their time at home.
right.
And one thing I wanted to talk to you about is schedules, because when this whole thing started, my friends, especially the ones with little kids who were trying to adjust to school, maybe at 6, 7, 8 years old, right? They would have these big whiteboards where it was like 9 to 9:30 this, and then 10 to, and then within a week it was like, wait, this is really hard. And I think schools have had to adjust, right, to what's actually possible for kids at home and who has access to what equipment. And with teens, it's different too. And I've heard about a lot of people, including adults, becoming a little more nocturnal.
Mm-hmm.
And I know parents are concerned about when their children are awake and engaged with the world. Is that really an issue? And I say that as someone who, I'm kind of like, if you're up all night, but you're doing cool stuff and your brain is working, does it matter as much as we think it does?
Well, it matters only in that it resets the biological awake and sleep clock, so that, I mean, again, this is not going to last forever. I mean, things will get back to some semblance of normalcy, or, in some way that people will have to get up, they'll go back to school at some point. And so if this has become the not going to bed till, and I've heard this a lot, where kids are not going to bed till 3 or 4 in the morning, and then they sleep, until 12 or 1, and then they, do what they're going to do. The problem with that is that then becomes the way their body then, they can't go to sleep at night, that it becomes, kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, I can't go to bed earlier. Well, no, you can't go to bed earlier because you've been staying up till 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning texting. And so I think that everybody does have a different rhythm of how they, we've got night owls and we've got, early birds, and there's some people who are morning people and there's some people who are night people. And I think with kids, it's okay for them, I think one of the things I tell parents to do is kind of observe your kid's natural rhythm. When, maybe you think they should do their homework from 9 to 9:30 or from 10 to 10:30, but maybe that's, one of the things that happens is, even though it's school, whatever version of school those kids are having, it's not, it doesn't feel normal to them in any way. And to do work at home, it's more normal for them to do that late in the afternoon and the evening, because that's when they used to do their homework, was, after school or after sports, and then they came home and did their homework. So this feels weird to them, even though, because every school is doing it differently, every teacher is doing it differently. And so I think the best a parent can do is, is to say, I get, that you want to stay up later and that's when their friends are available. But, especially with social media, if I were a parent, I would absolutely make sure that there is some, I'm just blocking on the word, things you put on the computer. This is going to be a game of charades. Controls.
Yeah.
Parental controls. This is like quarantine mush brain. Parental controls that can shut everything down at, maybe it's at 1 in the morning instead of 10 or 11. Maybe you acknowledge, okay, but that giving your kids carte blanche to watch movies until late at night. I mean, if kids can, they will. And so I think it's really important to make sure that, when you have these, there's a million, Disney Circle is good, Custodio, Verizon has one. You can just Google, best parental controls. You download it on your computer, you plug everything in, and at the least, I think we've given up on how much they're on Snapchat and how much they're on YouTube, but you can say everything's going to shut off, at 1 in the morning, or you come up with a time that works. But, to allow your kids a lot of them are not going to be able to shut that off, because kids are texting them and they get sucked down the Netflix tube, which, trust me, I'm down it too. So I'm right there with you, but I don't stay up. So I think it's trying to keep some semblance of a normal schedule.
Is there, depending on the size of the home you live in or who's in there, how many siblings you have, if any, and parents, and I have to imagine that some of it is privacy too, right? Like, after everybody goes to sleep, you get to be alone for 5 minutes. And I'm sure, my friends with young kids, it's like they want to get up early and earlier and stay up later and later to have time away from young kids who need a lot of attention. So is that something parents should remember that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the beginning of all this, there was so much family time. It was, dinners every night, because so many families don't get to do that. And now, the cooking, and then there was breakfast, and there was lunch, and, now you're eating 3 meals a day with your family. I mean, whoever does that?
Unnatural.
So someone was telling me this story about it was an 8-year-old who used to just basically eat and watch a movie because her parents didn't get home until 7:30, and the nanny or the son, whether she was whatever, she just ate by herself. And now all of a sudden the family's eating together, and she goes to her mom and she goes, "Mom, can't I just take my plate in my room and go, and go do something?" And so I think that, maybe everybody, there's 2 or 3 nights a week where people are on their own, and then we gather, they gather together for meals, as, but not maybe every night. Maybe everybody it can't tolerate that, especially if you've got 2 and 3 kids in the house and 2 parents who are home and not working. People are getting on each other's nerves around calls. They're on Zoom, get out, don't make a sound. I have my college students who who've all been home, they have no privacy. They have younger siblings. Everybody's making noise. So, I think it's, some kids are spending too much time in their rooms, and they need to be encouraged to join the family more. Again, you don't want anything to become the norm that's not necessarily healthy. So staying up till 4 a.m. and sleeping until noon it's just not healthy for their body. It's not going to be healthy for so and the same thing about, being, isolating too much, isolating too much from the family, or isolating yourself too much from friends. We don't want extremes. We want to acknowledge that everybody is handling this differently, and we have to be respectful of people's, sort of internal temperaments, and make sure that there are enough limits, that we know we're keeping them as healthy as we can. I mean, again, it's only been 2 months, in the lifetime of a person. It's not a lot, but for kids, they can get into these kind of habits. And for the same reason that you were talking about the brain, the music, that can become very habit forming, and then it's going to be really hard later.
We have a question from someone who says, Judy.
Hi, Judy.
No last names here, because I don't want to call anybody out with their kids, but what's the best way to encourage adult responsibility around the house? Our 2 daughters, 21 and 19, are home from college for the duration. Thanks. It's like one kid isn't a teenager. This is really hard.
Yeah. So making the kids be responsible for what's going on in the house, right? That
Yeah,
the parents are saying we're doing everything and they're doing nothing.
Yeah, and when I'm hearing in the love letters, specifically in the inbox, there's definitely a gender division of things I'm seeing about, there are twice as many dishes and who's doing them, and my place gets it's like I can ruin my own that in 20 minutes. So I'm sure there's a lot of work to do.
Well, I'm a big fan of stepping back and saying, is it, maybe families need to move to paper, I mean, not just saying you better do, what ends up happening is you become a broken record. Can you just empty the dishwasher? That's all I need you to do. And then, most kids, and I'm including 19 and 21-year-olds there, they don't care about that stuff, right? It's not important to them. They don't, because they know eventually somebody is going to get to the point where they can't take it anymore, and they're going to fix it. And there is not one person in the world that I know when they were teenagers say, yeah, chores, can't wait. It's just not, being responsible with the family. It's just not, that's not part of their hierarchy. And, go into any college student's dorm room, unless they're just a compulsive cleaner. I don't know what your dorm room was like, but, usually it was like someone came in and said, whoa, I mean, you guys should do a clean. The fruit flies would be everywhere. So part of it is sort of bringing the family together and saying, okay, I get it. you don't like doing that stuff, and neither do I. So we have to come up with a different solution. So is there one thing, so it's again, acknowledging people's differences and saying, instead of just assigning them things that they might be then resistant to, and then you add in this other layer now of parents having to do the hucking. How many times, it's the hucking, the constant nagging, the nag-hag, you become this nag-hag, and it just adds this other layer of anger. So it may be saying, okay, we're using too many dishes. We got to come up with a solution to this. Nobody wants to do them. So do we go to paper? Is that what it is? And then I make sure we have barrels all around. So it's the problem solving. Is it that everyone's using up the towels in the bathroom? That I walk into your bathroom, and that seems to be a big one, that there's 1,000 towels, on the bathroom floor, and they're all wet and slimy and, haven't been washed, and they keep getting new ones. Well, maybe what's the solution? Do we each get assigned one towel, one towel a week, and unless the laundry gets done, you don't get another towel. So it's, that you, it's not a punishment. It's, as a family, we're going to figure out, because we want to have clean towels, we want to have dishes, I don't want to be angry all the time because this is not stuff that's important to you, because I'm working now too. We're all in the same boat.
And we're doing so much more cleaning, like just the hand washing and the disinfecting. It's kind of exhausting. I'm thinking about my old roommate, who's a close friend, who I lived with for 6 years, and looking at me and saying very politely, what are you never going to do, and what do you not mind doing? And no one had ever asked me. Like, my mother never asked me, and I was like, I despise unloading a clean dishwasher.
Yeah.
I would rather scrub a floor, a toilet, and hearing it in that way of like, what do you want to pick? It was like revelatory.
That's exactly what I'm saying, is to do, like, there may be something that they wouldn't mind doing. It wouldn't, like, that's okay, like they could figure that out. And I think most people don't ask that question. They just get assigned something, then they get the resistance, and then then it becomes this this constant, and at 19 and 21, you're not going to punish them by something. You want them to buy in. And so you have to step back and say, what's going to be the most successful to get a buy-in here? And rather than, otherwise it's the lecture of, we're all a part of a family and everybody has to do their share, and don't that's just going to go in this ear and out the other ear. And, nobody's going to pay attention. So I think it's, what do you want to do? Pick one thing, and that's your thing.
I just want to remind people that you can submit a Q&A at the bottom. And
okay.
Questions. So we have a question. I'm not even going to use the person's first name because I'm scared for them. It just says, my middle daughter, who is already not the easiest person to deal with, is extra stressed having her college classes online, and she's being really nasty to the household. Any tips or words of wisdom, as she's really hard to live with right now?
Keep your distance. I teach college students, and I asked them I've been doing online teaching, and I asked them a couple of weeks ago, what do you think your parents hate most about you right now? And, what do you hate most about your parents right now? And, basically the kids were like, I just want them to leave me alone. I got that. I would say, that was the primary criticism of their parents, and that, they came from college, and they, how old was the kid she was talking about?
She didn't say, but
okay.
She said she did college.
Oh, because she's in college courses. Okay. So I knew there was a reason I went to the college thing. The kids were saying, our parents have not been living with us for the last however long they've been in college. And now we get home, and it's like, well, what are your assignments, and what work did you have to do? And have you did, they're doing what parents do, which is gather information. Parents have their agendas of all the things they want to stay on top of their kids for, and their kids are not used to having people do that for them. So when I say maintain a distance, I mean anything about school should be off the discussion table. That is, it's not your business to discuss. So think about the things, this parent, that when you talk to your kid about, what are the top 3 things you end up getting an attitude about? What are the things that you're asking her where she's saying, just get rid of my room, and leave, and if there are things like, I mean, if it's about, taking part and being responsible for the house, that's something different. But again, you might be on that nag hag route and they keep resisting you. And so you feel, dismissed by your kid. And there's nothing that feels worse to a parent is when your kid is dismissive of you and makes you feel small. That enrages so many parents. And so again, if I were this mom, I would sort of step back and say to myself, what are the areas that seem to piss her off the most? And are those the areas that I could back off about? Am I asking too many questions? Am I, trying to ask her about things that are really none of my business? I'm just interested in because we're in the same house. And so, a lot of what parenting is sort of stepping back and having some look in the mirror moments and saying to yourself, what do I do that's encouraging this behavior? I mean, this does not dismiss that your kid, it's a dance. Every relationship is a dance. Who's leading, who's following, are you both trying to control? And so you keep stepping on each other's toes. So it's figuring out what partner you are in that relationship. And is there anything you could do differently so that she doesn't get so antagonized? Because the only person you have 100% control over is yourself in that relationship. Mm-hmm. And so, and especially with college students, they are, they feel they're all grown up and they unfortunately have to be home now. And, they don't want you engaging in their life. So it's figuring out, where can I engage and where do I have to step back from?
That makes sense. We have a really complicated question that I know there's no simple answer to, but this person asks, what do you suggest when your teen has a sibling with a disability at times disrupts the family? And I've been thinking a lot about all of the resources that families have access to that suddenly they've lost in some cases, and how that's working and changing people's home lives. I'm not sure there is any easy answer to this kind of question.
I think that, oftentimes the non-disabled child has been asked to, they have a lifetime of saying, well, your sister or your brother, where they have to be the accommodator. They're always feeling like the accommodated person. Parents have to spend more time because of that kid. And, maybe they're, so this is a role. I remember working with a student once who's had a sister who had schizophrenia, and he was writing an essay about what that was like, and he said basically, I got it. I mean, she had an illness, and my parents were frightened, and they ended up. But I lost something here, because I kind of got shoved aside, and so I think the best thing that a parent like that can do is say, this is, I get it must be so hard for you to always have to accommodate, to recognize what that relationship has been like for that person, and is there anything that we could do differently to make it not so hard for you? And oftentimes what happens when you say that to a kid is that they being understood that this is really hard for them, will just say, no, it's fine. They just want they just want to be acknowledged for, because that kid does need more things, but maybe, and more supervision, and maybe they're asking more of him or her to do some of that, because, lacking those support systems in a family is excruciating. I mean, when you have a disabled mentally or physically, you become, or learning to, you become very dependent on those support people in the schools and whatever. And that is just, and now, that's just another layer. So I think it's just making sure that in some way that the kid that's not dealing with that, that you try to find out, is there anything that they could do differently to make it not so hard for them? I mean, being a parent now is it's just so hard. I mean, you're being asked to be everything, and it's just so unbelievably stressful.
Margaret has a question, and I have my own answer, but Joani's probably going to disagree. Margaret says, it will probably be addressed, but just generally, how to encourage teens to get off their devices and get outdoors, or generally do another activity than being on screens. And I just want to say,
go say it.
And
you hate going outside, right?
Well, I am going outside, but I just feel like, and in some of these other taking care sessions, we've talked about it, that's not all screen time is equal. And there's a creativity that might be involved in TikTok, and there might be a social engagement that's involved in Animal Crossing or whatever, and now screen time could be Zoom with a grandparent. Like I sort of, as somebody who was a latchkey kid who was raised on a lot of good TV, like I'm like, is it the worst thing? I don't know. Like outside is good.
It's not the worst thing. I mean, it's not the worst thing. And again, it's all about balance. I mean, truthfully, who exercises more than an hour a day anyway? I mean, it's not like any of us are outside, hours a day. I mean, if we're working, we're in the house. If they were in school, they would have been in the building, So I think, again, it's about realistic expectations. It's about saying, this is an extraordinary time that we're in right now. And it also has to do with the age of the kid. But if if you have younger kids, it may be, middle school kids, it may be that you do something together as a family rather than, when you say to a kid, just like go outside and do something, they don't know what to do. You know what I mean? It's like, not like, again, unless they're like a track kid and they know that they can, they have to work, if their kid is an athlete, but I was never that kid, who was into athletics, so I wasn't, and I didn't feel good. So some of it is they don't know what they're supposed to do. Like, why would they go for a walk by themselves? Never going to happen. So again, it's sometimes parents set themselves up with this expectation, but in terms of the how it's actually going to be executed is the missing piece. And so you absolutely are going to get pushed by. So it may be that it's, the dog needs to be walked 3 times a day. That's going to be that kid's job, and that will get them out of the house 3 times a day to walk a dog. Or it's, you need someone to pull weeds, or get out yourself and go do a bike ride together. And not all kids are, but you do, again, it's all about balance. You do want them to, especially now with the weather getting better, you don't want them sitting on their screens for 16 hours a day. If you've got a kid playing Fortnite for 8 to 10 hours a day, you don't want that. It's just not healthy, psychologically speaking. So everything has to be in balance. Doing a TikTok and creating a video is different than, just sitting and, and mindlessly thumbing it, right? So, and watching just endless YouTube videos, which again are funny and entertaining, but then, it's all about balance. This whole thing is about balance. And if any one thing gets out of whack, you find a workable way of getting it back in. That's a very general.
We have a question from Anonymous. What, if anything, can childless people do to support their friends who are parenting and going crazy in the company of their
Oh my God, this just...
And I am one of those childless people, and I'm doing my best to
I think you're doing so great with like your friends' kids and calling them. And
I mean, I do feel like I will babysit for everyone when this is over. Like, just
right.
At post-vaccine, I feel like I'm a baby, but it is, for all the concerns about people living alone, I'm so worried about people, especially who have toddlers. Like, you can't not watch those kids.
Yeah, this actually was something I wanted to make sure I got in before we finished, and this ties right into what you were saying, is that one of the things I noticed about teaching online this semester, which was the connection that I made with my students in a very different way than if I were sitting in class. I walk in and there's 30 kids sitting there and, we get right to class. But there was something very different about, like, I'd open the class a half hour early and kids would come in and we'd just, chat around. And at the end, they ended up, a lot of them were writing these really amazing things about the connection they felt to me, and which was, in some ways, it was the most meaningful college class I've ever taught. And what it said to me, though, is one of the things I think kids are missing are those individual relationships with other maybe adults in their life who are not their parents, because their parents have to, whatever parents do, whether they say nice things or, they're, oh, you're so wonderful, I love you. But, that teacher who would say, oh, good job today, or I love what you wrote, or, that sort of, or their coach, or their, that individual, or their, someone in their life other than their parents who recognize them as a separate human being. Like, oh, I see you. You're not invisible. I see you. And I think one of the things kids are feeling now is this sense of invisibility. And I sort of have this fantasy that like I know you have I think one of your friends has like a 12-year-old girl, and like, just like getting on the phone with her and just, maybe the two of you watch something together and then you get to talk about just some way that kids connect with somebody. If they have a coach and, they're not able to do a sport, maybe checking with that coach to see if that guy could, maybe that kid who's doesn't want to go out and exercise, maybe if that coach, some coach they really liked saying, oh, gee, just wanted to check in with you. And hey, have you been running? Cause that'll be great for you in the fall when you come back. Some way for a kid to say, oh, you remember me. I'm an important person. And I think being out of their normal structure has, teenagers are all about developing identity. And the way they develop identity is by being out in the world and figuring, and saying, this makes me happy, this doesn't, I like this person and not this person. And that piece has been sort of shut down. And so that was, I sort of feel like one thing parents can do is to, find significant other people in their life, aunts and uncles that, the kids like, not the aunt and uncle that's like, oh, God, hi, how's it going? But like the fun aunt, like you, Meredith.
Well, I do my best to check.
You're amazing, and those become very important relationships. And I think this time more than any, if they do have a favorite aunt and uncle or a favorite older cousin that's a college kid, or like that, maybe you as a parent can reach out to them and say, what would be so wonderful? I know you're busy, but could you like maybe set up like a weekly call and, or something like, not, parents sometimes have to do a little on the down low to get things organized, because if they say, why don't you call your cousin Peter, that's the kiss of death. That's never going to happen.
And it's to be honest, as a childless single woman living alone, it's good for me too. I mean, not just to check in with friends, but to have those sort of relationships with, one of my closest friends' kids is in college and she's figuring out what's next, and to get those texts from her makes me feel included, like I have that kind of family too, by extension. So I think that's really great. And in terms of the parents with toddlers, wish I could help you, but I'll be around later.
I know. Oh my God.
I just have to read this one question before we go, because it has nothing to do with teenagers, but when I saw it, I could not help but laugh.
Totally.
The theory of it all. But Jill asks, thank you very much for doing this. Does the pandemic feel like an Old Testament punishment? I'm not religious, but would sure like to behave better on the other side of this to keep it from happening again. And I was
wow. Well, we are in a plague.
It is, well, I think for many people
Passover
that way who did a Passover Seder, it was kind of heavy. But Joani, I just want to thank you for coming today. I mean, one of the things, like, I read Joani's book, even though it's about teenage, because she's my friend, but what's interesting is, even though I don't have teenagers and I'm not a teenager, so much of it
you were.
I was once, but so much of it is about meeting people where they're at and like meeting yourself where you're at. And I think a lot about the questions that were asked today and about how often I feel like they also had to do with the parents, like you said, that, is your child grieving prom, or are you grieving prom for them too? So just like parents sort of allowing themselves to understand that this is a shared thing, and that, it's not just about fixing it for somebody else. It's like, there's a loss for parents. I mean, when you're a parent, like, you want to see your kid dressed up and you want to see your kid graduate.
That's your fantasy. That's been your fantasy, and the graduation party and the pictures in the backyard. Yeah, there's a grieving process for parents too. Absolutely.
So thank you.
It needs to get acknowledged.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. And thank you everybody for coming. I say this every week, but it makes the world seem a little bit smaller to have people here talking about how we can do better in a time that is very, very scary, and hopefully will get less scary sooner than later. So this will go into a Q&A format. You can watch it later. You can tell your friends, and you can always listen to the Love Letters podcast. And Joani actually is on an episode of the Love Letters podcast, which is in season 3. I think the episode title is something like Mom's Boyfriend. You'll see.
We had so much fun.
A great story about a single mom and her dating story. So again, thank you so much, and
thank you, Meredith. We're all in this together.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.